Good morning. I'm Rowena Crosby.
And I'm Deborah Renner, and we're your co-hosts for this show. Thank you for joining us for the next 17 minutes for your Invisible Toolbox, the show that examines the tools necessary for working effectively with others.
And today we get to talk about credit checks. Not the financial kind, but the interpersonal kind. The kind that inform people how credible we are.
And we're going to examine the invisible tool that describes the art of soliciting feedback. Our tool will point out how to get constructive feedback from others. And if you're following along in your invisible toolbox, we're on chapter 63.
And the chapter is called Credibility Check. And we're going to take a look at two different types of feedback. We're going to look at a formal feedback mechanism for learning how others perceive us. And we're also going to look at, in our development challenge, how can we get informal feedback.
And we're going to examine why credibility and trust are essential for anybody who's considering a leadership position. And we're going to take a quiz, and it's going to be on the Leadership Practice Inventory, which is a 360-degree assessment.
And we're very much looking forward to our interview segment today, where we're going to welcome Melissa Ness from Arion HR. Melissa is the Chief Operating Officer and has had an enormous amount of experience both personally and in building her team with using feedback both formally and informally.
Now, the root word for credibility is actually credo, and that means trust. And to be successful, whether we're leading, managing, or just interacting with others, our personal credit is determined by how much people can trust us.
And the problem is we don't get to determine our credibility alone. Similar to when a financial institution does a credit check on you, they don't just touch base with you to see what you think of your own credit. They actually touch base and get some feedback from your lenders. And it's very similar in that when we're getting a credibility check on our own interpersonal skills, we get feedback from others.
So self-assessment is important, but it has to be in alignment with what others are thinking as well. We can't see ourselves the way others do, and so we have these blind spots, and we can mitigate those blind spots by taking a look at what others are thinking.
And it can be challenging to be courageous enough to open ourselves up to that kind of feedback. And it's hard to realize that feedback is a gift, but it truly is. And the ability to be able to get formal and informal feedback really can inform how we can grow as leaders.
Oh, and we can take action then.
Yes.
So let's take a look at our invisible tool of the week.
So our invisible tool of the week is found in chapter 63 of the book, and it's to solicit feedback.
Now, it is said that millennials want to make a difference in the world, and so many of them are really going for leadership positions early in their career. But the funny thing is, only 5% of them are stated to be taking these positions for financial reasons. They're basically taking these positions because they want to be people who can inspire and empower others.
And that's inspiring just to hear, isn't it?
It is.
And inspiring and empowering others actually requires others. So leadership is a reciprocal relationship between a leader and a follower, and that connection between the two is one of trust and credibility.
So how do we do this? We do it by seeking out feedback along with choosing our behavior. Just like when we get a credit check, we take a look at what lenders think, and we usually then can make some decisions about our spending or about how we use our finances. It's the same way with a 360-degree assessment. We're going to get an idea of what our followers think, and then we can choose our behaviors differently.
And Elon Musk talked about the importance of a feedback loop. And he described it as the feedback around what we've done and how we can improve, and the importance of involving others to be able to continue to grow.
Well, everybody loves a quiz. We always love this segment of the
We
program.
always love this segment. And so our quiz today is going to involve something that's called the Leadership Practices Inventory. Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner are authors of a seminal book called The Leadership Challenge. And in that book, they did a lot of research on leadership. And from that came this instrument called the Leadership Practices Inventory. We're going to test your knowledge a little on what this thing is maybe measuring.
Well, this will be fun. We have a couple statements. Let's start with the first one. You're going to decide if this is true or false. The LPI measures how you perform in 5 leadership areas. Do you think that that is true or false about the Leadership Practices Inventory?
Most people probably think it's true.
Part of
It's a trick question.
It is a trick question. Part of it is true. Actually, there are 5 areas that are measured. They measure how a leader encourages the heart, models the way, inspires
Enables others to act.
enables others, challenges the process, inspires a shared vision, but they're not taking a look at performance. What are they taking a look at, Ro?
They're taking a look at frequency. And that's something a lot of us struggle with. In fact, at Tero, when we first started looking at 360-degree assessments, we really struggled with this frequency scale. And that was at a time in history Jim Kouzes would take your phone call. And he explained to us, and this makes an awful lot of sense, that it doesn't actually matter how skilled you are in the workplace with your leadership if people aren't seeing evidence of it. And that's why it's a frequency scale. He compared it with the practices of law and the practices of medicine. Could be a great doctor or a great lawyer, but if you're not in practice, then we don't get the benefit of it. And so it is with leadership. Leadership truly is a practice.
So when people interpret their results, they have to interpret it in terms of frequency rather than performance. Well, let's try another one. LPI responders can be direct reports, managers, co-workers, or anybody who is in the vicinity of seeing that leader in action. Do you think that's true or false? It's actually true. And that's the beauty of the LPI, because as people develop into leaders, their scope broadens, and the LPI is able to capture that scope. And so you get a better result in terms of what you know about yourself.
Absolutely, and such a rare gift to be able to get feedback from people who see us from all different perspectives. And that's why it's called a 360. If the only feedback we're getting is from our manager and maybe from our direct reports, that's a 180. That's not a 360. So to get feedback all the way around, rounded feedback, an instrument like this is useful.
Absolutely.
Well, now it's time for us to move into the segment of the program we call Your Development Challenge. And it challenges us to challenge ourselves and maybe break a habit.
Well, we use things like the Leadership Practice Inventory as formal assessments, and they're just extremely helpful. But are there ways to get feedback informally that are legitimate?
And that's the day-to-day stuff. You know, how can we find out how we're learning and growing day-to-day? And we can do that through seeking informal feedback from people. And we've actually got a formula for that at Tero on how to do that well.
We do. We call it the ABCs because we like the feedback to be able to be specific to something someone's done. And so the A stands for the activity someone was involved in, the B for the behavior, their particular behavior in that activity, and then C is the consequence. So what was the result of the activity and their behavior in it? Ro, can you give us an example or describe a leadership example with regards to getting an ABC?
I would be happy to, because a lot of times when we ask for informal feedback, we get things like, oh, you're doing a great job. You know, that's not particularly helpful. So specific feedback really helps us assess how we're doing. So let's use the ABC in a positive and a constructive example.
Okay.
So you might ask someone for feedback on your presentation last week. So the activity was you made a presentation in a meeting last Friday. The behavior, and that's what we're most interested in, what was the leader doing? You had 20 minutes on the agenda. You spent the first 10 minutes making an excellent presentation on the content and the message you wanted to deliver. And then you used the remaining time to invite questions. The consequences of that behavior is that people left with their questions answered and everyone left on the same page. That'd be an example of getting good specific informal feedback. Now, what about if we need to learn to improve? Same example could be meeting last Friday, you were given 20 minutes on the agenda to present. Maybe you used all 20 minutes to talk about your message and didn't get any time to respond to questions. The consequences of that behavior is people left confused and didn't have their questions answered. Both of those are examples of feedback that's helpful for us because we can learn and grow from it.
Oh, and it's so specific that it gives us the exact thing that we can work on the next time to make it different. Well, now it's time to take a look at our social media posts of the week. Every week we post relevant content on interpersonal skills, and we're going to feature right now 2 of the posts that'll be on our platforms this week.
And our first post is actually from Forbes, and it's an article. It's called 10 Authentic Leadership Practices. And one of the tips is to earn to be trusted by courageously being truthful. You'll find a link to that article on all Tero social media platforms today.
And our second post actually discusses the LPI and the fact that on that inventory, most of the time, generally, the lowest score that leaders get is on soliciting
Almost
feedback.
always that's the lowest.
Now, leaders don't need to ask for feedback all the time, but if we're never doing it, we're probably missing opportunities to learn things that would be pretty important. It's an HBR article. It's titled, "To Get Honest Feedback, You Just Need to Ask," and it'll be on all social media platforms for Tero on Thursday.
And now we're excited to move into the segment of the program we call This Week's Interview. And we are so delighted to welcome Melissa Ness to the table. Melissa is the Chief Operating Officer of Arion HR, and she has had experience in developing her own leadership capabilities, as well as being entrusted with a team of leaders you need to develop. So you've had a lot of experience in formal and informal feedback.
I have, yes.
Yeah, we're excited
It's
to talk
been
to
very
you about
helpful,
it.
as you've mentioned. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us,
Thank
Melissa.
you.
Before we talk about LPI, can you tell us just a little bit about the scope of your role there at Arion?
Sure. The scope of my role at Arion is really overseeing all the service and operations side. We are an HR outsourcing company, and so all the things that go along with your HR department are included in that scope of my responsibility. So payroll, HR, benefits, all those things that wrap up into there. As well, I also oversee the finance area and kind of some of the system stuff within the company.
A whole bunch of areas that you
Yeah.
need to get right because your
Exactly.
clients count on their
Yes.
payroll being
They do.
They're funny that way.
Yeah.
We like our
Yes.
payroll to be right.
Well, with regards to the LPI, you've had numerous experiences. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've employed it?
Yeah, well, first, I personally did it. That was important to me to kind of model that way. I know that's also a value
one
of the
of the
book.
practices.
Yeah. So I first implemented it for myself and learned a lot from it. And then after I did it, I decided that it would be a really good tool to help my leadership team with as well. So we've implemented it on different levels of the organization.
That's fantastic. Well, how did the information that you gained from the LPI inform your leadership?
Well, as you kind of mentioned early on, those blind spots, we all have them, good or areas we need to improve on. So it was a chance for us to all look at those and inform us on what those are, because as you mentioned, it's hard to see ourselves completely from our own lens. We need to see around us and how other people are perceiving us and areas we may need to work on or that we're really great at that we didn't realize.
Well, that brings up such a good point, because a lot of times people just think it's going to be feedback that's constructive and it might be negative, but there's actually positive things that leaders can be doing that they're not even aware that are important to the people that they lead.
And different across different constituent groups.
Yeah.
Sometimes one group sees us doing something that another group doesn't
Absolutely.
have occasion to, and then we've got to ask ourselves about that.
Absolutely.
What particular areas did you find were important to you that you discerned from the results of your LPI?
On my very first one, the thing that really stood out for me was creating stories around an inspired, shared vision and the frequency around which I was doing that. That stuck out for me as an area I needed to work on to help my team connect on a regular basis to what that was. So really was nice because I was able to then get some tools and think about it, be more intentional about it. And on the next LPI that I took, it really showed that it helped. So it was nice not only initially to learn what that was, but to see if what I had employed was working.
That is so great to use it as a benchmark
it
and be
is.
able to actually document the growth. I can see why you're such a great chief operating officer, because you're operating personally. That's just so
Yes.
important to go at it once, but then to use it as a tool to actually be able to document improvement. What advice would you give other leaders? Not everybody's as open to putting themselves out there for an LPI. So what advice would you give leaders either in doing it or maybe in bringing it to their team as well?
I think you make a great point. For me, it was if I'm going to be in leadership and help other people grow, that I have to be open to being aware of everything and as much as I can about myself. So being brave about it, but also treating it like a gift. As you guys mentioned early on, that gift is true. And if people are taking time to give you that feedback, they are giving you a gift. And really taking that gift, and then the next step is action. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to grow yourself and become a better leader?
Yes. Did you take it back to people with regards to some conversations about specifics? Has that infused the culture in terms of your culture there and how you work with each other?
Definitely. Because I did it and then several people that I work with have done it, we are able to talk about the same things, the same themes, those 5 that you mentioned. And, we're able to kind of help each other and talk through ideas, ways to improve or just share knowledge.
Yeah, Ariane
There's a
being
common language.
Yeah, and HR professionals, it's so exemplary that they
Oh my
are
goodness,
actually
yes.
doing what
It's important.
what we would want others to do as well.
So what kinds of things are you doing, Melissa, to foster the informal feedback culture in addition to going through this rather formal exercise every 12, 18, 24 months?
Yeah, we talk regularly, of course, but we also set aside time with each other weekly or bi-weekly, depending, and just have that set aside time for that informal feedback. So it's important to build relationships. It's important to talk to each other and just give each other both ways feedback on what's going on, both personally and professionally. So that's something that we do across the board in Ariane HR.
Thank you so much for sharing these things, and you truly are modeling the way
Well,
for
thank you
others
for-
in sharing this information.
Absolutely, and fostering a culture of feedback. There's very few things leaders do that are more important than developing others and learning how to give and receive feedback. So thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you for having me and helping us with the tool.
And thank you for joining us today. If you missed any segment of the program or want to share it with others, you'll find the entire program loaded up to Tero's YouTube channel. Tune in again next Monday at 9:03 Central Time, where we're going to take a look at eye contact.
And now it's your turn. We welcome your suggestions for future shows. What team interactions, leadership issues, customer interactions would you like to see us really take a look at during the show? You can email those ideas to ideas@yourinvisibletooolbox.com, and we will incorporate those ideas into our shows. We also invite you out there on your favorite social media platform to interact with us. We're out there, and take a look at those posts that Ro and I talked about. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, click on the link below and you'll be able to subscribe and be alerted to when future shows will air. Again, a thank you to Kyle Plummer, our cameraman and director.
And thank you to Melissa for joining us.
Absolutely.
And thank you for all of you joining us today. And that's a wrap.